Hi, and welcome to chapter 9. Today we're going to talk about interpersonal relationships. You might think that we've already been talking about interpersonal relationships all semester long, and yeah, we have. But today we're going to delve into some qualities of interpersonal relationships that we haven't really talked about this semester. We have talked about things like listening and knowing who we are and how who we think we are impacts communication, and conflict and nonverbal and verbal messages. And while all of those components go into interpersonal relationships, today what I want to talk about are some distinct characteristics specifically of interpersonal relationships. So I've got my little screen here, and we're going to have some PowerPoint, and hopefully this will be a good way of communicating the content while you're listening to the video. So interpersonal relationships connect us together. So we've already talked about the fact that communication is the characteristic that builds interpersonal relationships, right? Without communication, we don't have relationships. And relationships, interpersonal relationships, are what connect us to others. And so we are connected together through the types of communication we have and the quality of the relationships as we build them. Not only do they connect us together, but they build a history. So think of every relationship you have having its own history book. And when that relationship first begins, the book is empty. Like there's no pages written in, they're all blank pages. And everything that happens in that relationship from the beginning to the end of that relationship is written in this book. And we develop this connection with others because we're building that history. And that's what keeps us to kind of stay in relationships during the winding road times. It's because not only do we like that person and we like that relationship, but there's a history there. I don't know, do you have any relationships that you've had since you were like little? Like, I met this kid in kindergarten and we've been friends ever since. And that's a pretty long history book. And the reason maybe that you're still connected with one another isn't because you've got a ton of things that are similar in life experience, but because you have connection, you have a history with that person. And that helps to connect us together and build relationship. Also, relationships are irreversible. This means that we can't reverse relationships. We can't rewind time like a DVR. We can't rewind what was happened and get to that place again in the relationship. So, like if a married couple who's been married 10 years goes on a trip and they go to the same place they went on their honeymoon. Now, you might stay in the same room, you might do the same things, you might see the same sights, but the relationship at 10 years is different than the relationship when you first got married. And you can't rewind time to experience those same feelings that you did on your honeymoon 10 years later. That doesn't mean there can't be fresh, new, interesting feelings and connections. It's just not the same as it was 10 years ago. It's irreversible. And so we're continually moving forward in relationships. Our history is moving forward. Our connections are moving forward. We can't stop or reverse relationships. So there's two major qualities of interpersonal relationships that we're going to talk about today. And the first is intimacy. According to your book, intimacy is the degree to which a person's sense of self is accepted and confirmed by the other person. So intimacy is the degree to which I feel accepted and I feel confirmed or valued in that relationship. I like to think of intimacy as connectedness. It's the quality that binds us together and makes us feel a part, valued, important, and it makes us value that relationship. There are 4 qualities of intimacy. Now, this isn't in your textbook, but I think it's important to talk about, not only so we understand the different qualities, but the different dynamics of these qualities in relationships. The first is physical closeness. And physical closeness is literally touch. And we can have this in all different types of relationships. So if we hug someone, or cuddle with someone, or put our arm around someone, or even shake someone's hand, all of that's physical touch. And that can create bonds. Also, romantic relationships have physical closeness, whether it be sexual or not sexual. The touch is an important part in romantic relationships and in other relationships. When I was in college, we all had to take this freshman orientation class, and we went to a ropes course. Have you ever been to one of those? It was like challenges that we were doing. And so my class was assigned a certain challenge, and we were all standing on this really large log. And we had to, without getting off of the log, get in order of our birthdays. So in order to get around other people, we had to hold on to each other to try to maneuver ourselves around each other to get into the order of our birthdays, because we weren't standing in that order when we got on the log. And the idea was they were trying to create connection by having us interact physically. Did it work? Nah, I don't really think it was all that important to my relationships with any of those people. But I do think physical closeness in general is something that we can enhance our intimacy with. Maybe not create intimacy initially, but definitely enhance that intimacy. Another type of quality of intimacy is intellectual sharing. And this is the sharing of our thoughts, our ideas, our opinions, our perceptions. It's our ideas that we're exchanging. And some people, you might have a friend that you just love to talk to about current events. And that's an example of a relationship that builds intimacy through intellectual sharing, just chatting and talking and exchanging ideas and thoughts. Number 3 is emotional sharing. This is the sharing of experiences, of feelings, of thoughts that are of more personal nature. So stereotypically, women get the rap of loving to connect emotionally. And I think there's definitely women who like that. I think there's men who like that as well. But emotional sharing is sharing kind of the vulnerable spots, the feelings that are behind maybe our ideas, and connecting through those emotions. And lastly, shared activities, doing things together. Maybe you have a friend that you like to go see, Marvel movies with, or maybe you have a friend that you go shoe shopping with, or play video games with, or go hiking or running with. These are shared activities. When Jason, my husband, and I lived on the farm, we were planting trees because there was this one area that was a plowed field at one time, and we were not going to use it as a plowed field anymore. So we planted trees, and over the 10 years we lived there, we planted 70 trees. And so that was definitely a shared activity, and we had it down to like an art. Who dug the hole? Who got the hole ready? Who put the tree in the hole? All the way through until that tree was planted. And then every spring we would walk around and look at those trees and see them budding out and their new growth. And it was a bonding time for us because that was something we did together. It was a shared activity. So the thing to remember about these 4 qualities of intimacy is that we might show and accept intimacy in different ways than our relationship partner does. So maybe I am definitely an emotional sharing type of person. I connect best through sharing emotions. But my friend is all about shared activities, and that friend doesn't really care about sharing emotions, but she or he feels connected based on the things we do together. Could you see how two people could really be trying to connect on an intimate level and just miss each other in the night because we're not sharing in the same way? Someone's really trying so hard to connect by being emotional, and the other person's going, really? Let's go do something together. That'll make us connected. Really? Let's just sit and talk. You might have had conversations like this before. So we need to understand not only how we give and accept intimacy, but how our relationship partner or partners do, because it's not just romantic connection, but it's a friendship or a family member relationship that we can kind of think about these and understand that not everyone speaks the same language when it comes to intimacy. Now, there are two different types of intimate relationships that we're involved in. And I think all of us are in both of these types of relationships. The relationship of circumstance is a relationship that we're in because of a circumstance, meaning this is not something we controlled, but something that just happened to us. Maybe it's the family that you were raised in. Most people don't choose their mom or dad, their siblings. And so these are relationships of circumstance. And we are in these relationships and we maintain these relationships, not because we thought that would be a cool relationship to have, but because life circumstances put us in those relationships. We also have relationships of choice, and these are relationships we are in because we choose that relationship. A friendship, a romantic relationship, these are relationships of choice. We say, I see value in you. I choose this relationship. Now, sometimes relationships of circumstance turn into relationships of choice. So, we were in this relationship because we had no choice, but now I choose this relationship. So maybe a relationship of circumstance could be your classmates. You were put in a class with a bunch of other people that you didn't know, and you formed a friendship with somebody. And after the circumstance ended, after that class ended, you still chose to maintain that relationship. So what was once a relationship of circumstance turns into a relationship of choice. And these are two different types of relationships that can be interpersonal and share these qualities. Now, a little memory device for you. For the 4 qualities of intimacy, P-I-E-S, pies. Ooh, I like pies. And that should help you to remember the 4 qualities. So now that we've talked about intimacy, let's also talk about attraction. Attraction is what gets us to form and maintain relationships. So it's what gets us to go, that relationship has potential. And it's what gets us to stay in the relationships that we've already formed together. So there's 2 different types of attraction. First, there's short-term attraction. And short-term attraction is what gets us into or to create or initiate relationships. Now, there's 2 different qualities that really draw us to other people. One of them is proximity. So we're more likely to form relationships with people that are close to us proximity-wise. So we're more likely to form a relationship with a neighbor, or maybe a parent who stands on the sidelines as their kids play soccer. Or you're more likely to form a relationship with someone that's sitting next to you in class than someone who's sitting across the room from you in class because of opportunity, because of proximity. We're more likely to form relationships with people that are around us, that are close to us geographically, spatially. Like, I've got plenty of friends in Texas. I don't have a single friend that lives in New Jersey. And that's just because I don't have a lot of opportunity to meet people in New Jersey because New Jersey is so far away. And so proximity is one source of initial attraction. And the other is physical attraction. There's something about someone that piques your interest that relates to physical attraction. Now, we might use physical attraction in like friendships, but we definitely use them in romantic relationships. So what attracts you to someone physically? Maybe it's their eyes, or maybe it's their smile, or maybe it's their physique. For me, I always wanted to date someone who was taller than I was. I didn't want to be the tall one in the relationship. So it was important when I was meeting people to kind of size them up and say, how tall are you? Oh, you're taller than me. Good. So there's lots of things that draw people physically to one another. Beauty really is in the eye of the beholder, and what makes one person physically attractive to one might not be physically attractive to someone else. But attraction draws us into relationships. And like even in a friendship, we're more likely to form relationships with people who are similar looking to us. Similar looking might be they dress similar, or they look similar. Like I might be less likely to form a relationship with someone who has a green mohawk than someone who has a normal haircut and dresses similar to me. Because the physical attraction says we're more likely drawn to people who have similarities and qualities that are physically attractive. Next are long-term attraction, and this is what gets us to stay in the relationships that we formed. This is what gets us to continue on in those relationships. So there's lots of different qualities that get us to maintain those relationships. One is self-disclosure. Self-disclosure is intentionally sharing something with someone that they wouldn't know if we didn't tell them. So self-disclosure is not I'm wearing a striped shirt or I have red glasses. That's not self-disclosure because you can see that with your own eyeballs. Self-disclosure might be an experience. Like not everyone knows that I am a professor of speech. And so if I tell someone that, that's self-disclosure. And there's different levels of self-disclosure. Do you remember earlier on in the semester we talked about people are like layers and we have lots of people are like onions and we have lots of different layers? Well, in self-disclosure, we typically will tell people about the outer layers easily, and then we'll work into the inner layers. And so self-disclosure says when we're maintaining relationships, we'll continue to progress in telling people more about ourselves. Another quality that gets us to maintain relationships is reciprocation of liking. This is we like people who like us. We like people who show us that they like us. And people like to be shown that they are liked. And so we are more likely to maintain relationships with people who are nice to us, who are kind to us, who are thoughtful and remember things about us, because those types of qualities express that they like us. And in turn, we can be thoughtful, we can be compassionate, we can be caring, we can show someone else we like them, and then they will more likely to be attracted to us long term. Another quality of intimacy or of long-term attraction is similarities. So similarities in things we like to do together. We have things in common. We have hobbies or interests or passions that are similar. And because of the similarities, we find connection in doing those things together and discussing those things together and sharing in those things together. But there's also the idea that opposites attract. Now, I think that's a cliche that has a little bit too much emphasis on it. Oh, that person's so not like me, but that's okay because opposites attract. Yeah, but only in some arenas and in some areas. So this is called complementary needs. And this is the idea that we look for people who fill gaps in who we are. Because everyone has strengths and weaknesses. And we want someone who can fill in the gaps of our weaknesses while we fill in the gaps of their weaknesses. So it's not like we're completely opposite and different, but we have different strengths that we can bring to the relationship that we add to that other person. That's a complementary need. And when we continue to fill the needs for others and have those others fill the needs for us, those can be complementary. Now, your book talks about how that can go terribly awry and we can very much become dependent on each other. So a dependent relationship is where there are too many needs being met by someone else and we can't fulfill for ourselves any needs. And that balance becomes very unhealthy. And so extremely dependent relationships are where we rely too much on others to fulfill our needs. But it's okay to have someone fill gaps for us, fill things that are important to us that we might not be able to fulfill for ourselves. So attraction, it's what gets us to form interpersonal relationships and what gets us to maintain those interpersonal relationships. Now, in your book, this is an elevator. This is a fancy elevator. This is like an elevator in a house. Sign me up. But your book talks about relationships are like elevators. And what this means is that we've got different floors that we can get on or off of a relationship that develops that relationship. So your book introduces what are called turning points. And a turning point is an event that's associated with change in a relationship. So like the elevator, a turning point can make us go up a floor, or a turning point can make us take that elevator down a floor. And so turning points are things that happen in relationships that create change. So there's two different types of turning points that you can have in a relationship. A causal turning point is an event that causes change. An event that causes change. Now, this can be positive change, like the first time a romantic dating couple says, "I love you," or obviously big things like marriage or a child being born. These are all positive causal turning points, an event that really does change the relationship. There's also causal turning points that tend to be more harmful to relationships. Maybe it's the first big fight, or even what we think is positive can have a really difficult outcome in a relationship. Maybe it's a child, or maybe it's an injury or illness. These are events that create change in relationships. The other type of turning point is a reflective turning point. And this is a turning point that points back and says, change has already occurred, but it was so gradual you didn't notice it until it was pointed out, and we reflect back on that change. So say you and someone else have been dating or seeing each other for a while, and you've not really defined that relationship, but it seems to be like it's progressing and becoming an important relationship. It's becoming serious. And one day in the mail, you get a wedding invitation. And the wedding invitation is addressed to both of you on the same wedding invitation. And you look at that invitation and you think, that person invited both of us on the same invitation. They must think we're in like this serious relationship. Are we in a serious relationship? Oh my gosh, I'm in a serious relationship. So the relationship didn't just become serious the minute you got this invitation with your names on it, but like slowly and progressively, the relationship has become serious. And it wasn't until something pointed it out that you realized, you reflect back on the seriousness and realize, yeah, you're in a serious relationship. That's a reflective turning point. And these turning points, causal and reflective, are what cause our elevator to go up floors or to go down floors, or to stay at a certain floor and just not move. So what are these floors or levels of relationship? Mark Knapp, who is a professor of communication at the University of Texas at Austin, developed this description of relationship escalation and de-escalation. And he basically said, when a relationship is developing, it develops in 5 stages. And then he also said when relationships are backing off or falling apart or ending, it also has 5 stages. You wrote your discussion board on these stages. Hi. I'm talking to my students. Do you want to say hi?
I can say, hey, don't mind one.
I'm going to borrow that if you don't mind.
Okay.
Thank you.
Oh,
I'll give it back. Close the door, please. I know. You can close the door. Thank you. Well, okay, so the 5 stages of escalation. And now escalation is moving toward intimacy. It's building personal, interpersonal relationships that are moving to very intimate relationships. The first stage in relationship development is pre-interaction awareness. And this is the moment that you realize another person exists. Now, we all know that there are people out and about in the world that are walking around that we have never met before. And we know they're out there, but we don't know who they are or what they specifically look like. So the minute you recognize someone that is out there as a specific person, maybe the first time you see someone, or the first time you get to talk to that person or introduce yourself, that is pre-interaction awareness. Second of all is the acquaintance stage. And this is the stage where you might chit-chat with someone at a social event. You exchange that surface level impersonal information. Hey, what do you do? Where are you from? Tell me about your family. Those types of things that are not really groundbreaking or things that you wouldn't tell just anybody. So you would tell pretty much anybody these types of things. And there are relationships that are just acquaintances, and then that's like their elevator. You get off on that floor and you never move past that. And some other relationships will move on to exploration. And exploration, in this stage, you are still sticking to safer topics, but you're spending more time together. You're getting to know one another. The breadth, the different types of things you discuss is becoming more and more. Oh, there's the key cat. And so in exploration, you are diving deeper into the topics that are important to you. But we don't necessarily share very highly personal information in this stage. Step 4, or stage 4, is intensification. And this is where we begin what is called risky self-disclosure. In this stage, we are now telling that person important things about us that we don't tell other people, that might be information that is hurtful if someone were else, like if they were to tell other people about it. And so this is important information to us. So in stages 1, 2, and 3, what we're doing is building trust. So that when we get to stage 4, the intensification, and we say, you know what, this is important, I want to tell you this now, we have that trust built in. So stages 1, 2, and 3 build the trust. So when we arrive at stage 4, we can create senses of security that we can tell that risky information to that person. And then the last stage of escalation is intimacy. This is the height of relationship development. According to Mark Knapp, in this stage, it's highly synchronized self-disclosure. It's free-flowing. It's a trusting relationship in which we don't mind continually sharing important information with that other person. So relational escalation moves toward intimacy. Relational de-escalation moves away from intimacy. So just like escalation, there are 5 stages, but we don't do these stages in reverse. That doesn't make sense. There's new stages that we will follow. First is called turmoil and stagnation. And what we're doing in this stage is we're increasing conflict and we're increasing complacency. So as conflict goes up, bickering, not getting along, complacency goes up as well. Just, I don't want to try. I know that there's things that could be better in this relationship, but it takes too much work right now. And I would venture a guess to say that lots of interpersonal relationships that are in the intensification and intimacy stage will go through turmoil and stagnation. It might be a difficult time in life. There might be stresses. There might be hardships at work or in the family. And when the stress goes up, so does turmoil. And so it's not like if we move into this turmoil and stagnation phase that we're just done for. That's it. We started the de-escalation and there's nothing we can do. And we can intensify and create greater feelings of intimacy in this stage, but it takes a little bit of effort to make that turnaround. Next is de-intensification. In this stage of relationship de-escalation, what's happening is our conflict is increasing and our distance is increasing. So we begin to emotionally disconnect. This becomes a little bit more serious. So not only are we spending less time together, there's more conflict, but now emotionally, I'm saying, you know what? I don't know. I think maybe I can connect with someone else and get my emotional need met somewhere else rather than that relationship. There should be some flags going on here. Not that we can't turn de-intensification around, but when we begin to withdraw emotionally, then we're really handicapping our ability to move toward intimacy. And so de-intensification comes next. And then individualization. And this is where we begin to see the relationship partners not as we, but as you and as me. And so we are separating our ideas. We're separating who we are. We're not a couple. We are not best friends. We are not important people to each other. It is you and it's me. And that often leads to separation. So for romantic relationships, this is we go our separate ways. This is we broke up. This is we divorced. This is we moved out. This is the ending of the relationship. This is custody decisions. This is division of property. This is we are done. The relationship is over. And while most people think that that's the end of de-escalation, there's one other component that's important to consider, and that's the post-separation effects. Those are the lingering things that happen in a relationship after the relationship is over. So these things include hurt that needs to be, mended. The discovering of who you are as an individual. The, Bubba, thank you.
Hey, Ghosties want to say hello to you.
Okay, thank you. This is, so if you share a child with someone else and you have to see that person because there's custody exchanges, then anytime you see that person and the feelings that come up could be post-separation effects. What if that significant other that you don't have a relationship with starts seeing someone else? Feelings, and you deal with those. So there's lots of post-separation effects that come after the relationship's over that's still part of the de-escalation process. So NAP is applauded for understanding the escalation, the elevator, moving toward intimacy or away from intimacy. But the thing that is missing from this discussion is what causes someone to escalate or de-escalate in a relationship? What moves someone from one stage to the next? So we're going to look at 2 theories of relationship development that answer that question. Why are we escalating? Why are we de-escalating? So first, we're going to look at a theory called social exchange theory. I love this theory because it is something that applies to our lives maybe every day. And social exchange theory says that we make relationship decisions based on the perceptions of costs and rewards. Have you ever tried to make a decision and made a pros and cons list? I know I remember doing that when I was trying to decide where to go to college. I made a physical list. I was thinking about this place and I was thinking about this place. I looked at the pros and cons to help me make a decision. Well, just like a pros and cons list, we weigh the benefits of being in a relationship to the negatives or costs of that relationship to make relationship decisions about escalation or de-escalation. So there's multiple or many types of costs and rewards. The first is a forecasted reward or cost. And a forecast is a prediction for the future. So we think about that relationship and we guess at the future of that relationship and what is going to benefit us from being in that relationship and what is going to cost us from being in that relationship. And then we will make decisions based on those predictions. But just like the forecast, they're not always accurate. So we're really guessing here and maybe wishing or hoping, but it's not necessarily accurate. Second are immediate rewards and costs. That's what we get for being in that relationship at that moment. So maybe you get the reward of that person cooks dinner for you in the evenings, and a reward might be that person helps you with your homework, or that reward might be that person brings income so that you can afford to go to school. Those could be immediate rewards or immediate costs. You have to do something for that person. You have to be there for that person. There's something about that relationship that also makes you have to sacrifice. And if the immediate rewards are few and the immediate costs are great, we might say, I don't know if this relationship is worth escalating. Number 3 is cumulative costs and rewards. So I have my piggy bank here. I stole it from my son's room. And this piggy bank is going to help us understand cumulative costs and rewards. So if you have a piggy bank, it's empty. And every time you get a reward, money goes in the piggy bank. Oops. Yay! But every time there's a cost, money comes out of the piggy bank. Oop, there it goes. Aw, right? So cumulative says that as long as we have more money in the piggy bank than we have costs coming out of the piggy bank, we're overall satisfied. More rewards than costs in general. That's cumulative. But also, there's magnitude and ratio. And this says not every reward is the same. We've got quarter rewards, or nickel rewards, or dime rewards, or penny rewards, right? And not every cost is the same. We've got quarter costs, or nickel costs, or dime or penny costs. So if you're giving me penny rewards, but you're taking out nickel costs, I better get a lot of these penny rewards, and really, are they going to add up to be the same as this nickel cost? And so logically, even if we've got 100 pennies in our piggy bank, if we are being asked to have quarter costs, those costs are going to drain that piggy bank really quick. And so magnitude and ratio says that it's not just cumulative, but it's the types of rewards and costs that create escalation or de-escalation in a relationship. So lastly, I want to talk about relational dialectics theory. It's another theory that talks about why relationships escalate or de-escalate. This one, by definition, is a theory that states that relationships experience tensions and that these tensions push or pull relationships toward or away from intimacy. Remember, the escalate toward intimacy or the de-escalate away from intimacy. So all relationships that are interpersonal experience all of these tensions that we're about to talk about. There are 3 tensions. Number 1 is called connectedness versus autonomy. And another word for connectedness is togetherness. And another word for autonomy is independence. And so sometimes we will have this tug of war that goes on about doing things together versus doing things independently. You might have heard this conversation in your household or with your friend or family member or significant other. We need to spend more time together. We need to do more together. And the other person's like, yeah, but I need to have my time to do what I want as an individual. It's a classic discussion in a lot of relationships. In fact, connectedness versus autonomy is the number 1 most frequently experienced dialectical tension. It's the tension about connection versus independence or autonomy. The second dialectical tension is predictability versus novelty. Predictability is routine. It is assuredness. It is the things we expect and know. I don't know about you, but I have a routine. I feel like my routine's a little off with all of this shelter in place, but I have a routine that I usually do. I have a routine in the shower. I have a routine on a daily basis. And those routines help me to work through the day. And while routines or predictability is good, some people love novelty, spontaneity, doing things that are not planned, flying by the seat of your pants. And according to your textbook, the number 1 reason why romantic couples end relationships is boredom or lack of novelty, lack of spontaneity. And so predictability versus novelty can be a tension when someone in that relationship values the routineness and someone else says, I'm so bored of routine. I want that novelty, that newness, that differentness. And we can begin that tug of war again. And lastly is openness versus closeness. Openness is communication, talking, sharing. That can be emotional sharing or intellectual sharing. And closeness is privacy. That doesn't necessarily mean we're holding back something important or trying to be deceitful, but we are saying, I don't need to tell you everything that I'm thinking. I can withhold, and that's okay with me. And so the tug of war can begin when one person wants to be open and share and wants the other person to share. And that person's like, no, I'm good. I don't need to share everything. And we begin that tug of war. So how do we manage these tensions? Lastly, your book talks about 4 strategies for coping with dialectical tensions. We can deny the fact that they exist. There are not tensions in relationships. No, I don't know what you're talking about. We're not playing tug of war. There's cyclical alternation, and this is where we choose one side of the tension or another at certain times. So maybe we're feeling distant or far away from each other, disconnected, so we'll favor connectedness for a time. And then there might be someone who says, you know what, we're spending a little bit too much time together, so we value some autonomy. It's a cycle. Everything cycles. We can value connectedness, and then we can value autonomy. Moderation is trying to find that middle ground where we're not engaging either side of the tension fully, but instead we're trying to just do little bits, a little bit of openness, a little bit of privacy in order to try to find a balancing act. And then lastly is reframing. And reframing is looking at these tensions not as you against me, but both of these qualities are important. We do need some predictability because we need to get through the day, and there are routines that we have to do because we've got responsibilities, work, school, homework. We have to have routines, but not everything in life has to be routine. We can have spontaneity, work it into the week somehow so that it's fun and engaging. So it's not a tug of war. It's both things are important in relationships, and we can work to find value in both. So you're going to find an extra credit opportunity posting this week in Blackboard in which you are going to apply these dialectical tensions and these coping strategies to a Dear Abby column. Have you ever seen Dear Abby or heard of Dear Abby? She's an advice columnist, and people will write to her and say, please help me, give me advice. And some of those columns are actually issues that surround the dialectical tensions. So there will be instructions for you to identify a dialectical tension that's present in the Dear Abby letter, and then to offer a coping strategy that will help that person to overcome or work through that tension. So there'll be directions. It's posting in an announcement, so be on the lookout for that so that you can apply and understand the dialectical tensions, but also so that you can get extra credit for exam 3. If you have questions, send me a message. I hope you were able to listen to this whole lecture because there's a lot of valuable information in it. And we'll see you next week for Chapter 10. Take care, y'all.